The night everything changed began at a lakeside restaurant in northern Michigan, where my family had gathered to celebrate my promotion after years of being treated like the person who was expected to solve everyone else's problems. I arrived carrying a small gift for my father and a quiet hope that, for once, the evening might be about something I had accomplished rather than something my family needed from me. My name is Claire Bennett, and as I stepped beneath the warm amber lights of the restaurant patio, I noticed immediately that my older brother Ryan was receiving the attention while my mother, Evelyn, proudly told relatives about his new boat, his expensive renovation plans, and the vacation she had just helped finance. When my aunt finally asked about my promotion, Mom interrupted with a laugh and said, "Claire is always working, sweetheart, but Ryan is the one finally doing something impressive." And everyone chuckled as though she had made an innocent joke rather than dismissed something I had worked toward for years. I forced a smile, took my seat, and reminded myself that I had stopped expecting validation from people who only seemed to notice me when they needed a favor. Then Ryan's 12-year-old daughter, Sophie, came running across the patio carrying a box that I had brought for the family, and before anyone could stop her, she dropped it onto the table, revealing the handmade watch I had purchased for Dad and scattering the carefully wrapped pieces across the floor. I bent down to collect everything while my brother laughed and said, "Relax, Claire. It's not like you bought anything important." But his words landed differently this time, because I suddenly remembered how many times I had sacrificed something of my own to keep their lives comfortable. I had helped Mom cover a medical bill years earlier, guaranteed Ryan's small business equipment loan when the bank rejected him, paid the deposit on my parents' rental house after they sold their old one, and quietly transferred money whenever someone called me with another emergency, always hearing the same sentence. "You're the dependable one, Claire, and family takes care of family." What they never knew was that being dependable had cost me more than money, because I had delayed moving into my own place, postponed graduate school, and spent years building an emergency fund that seemed to disappear every time another family crisis arrived. While everyone applauded Ryan for taking risks and praised Mom for keeping the family together, I became the invisible financial cushion underneath their lives. That evening, however, something inside me shifted when Ryan casually announced that Mom had promised to help him purchase a second property, and when I asked whether she had actually thought through the numbers, he looked at me and said, "Why do you care, Claire, unless you're planning to pay for it?" The patio suddenly seemed much quieter, and even though several relatives looked uncomfortable, Mom shrugged and said, "Don't start one of your lectures tonight," as if responsible questions were somehow an insult. I stared at the people around that table and realized they had never mistaken my kindness for love, because they had simply learned that kindness from me could be converted into money, favors, signatures, and silence. I stood up, placed my untouched dinner beside my chair, and told them calmly, "I hope the property works out because starting tomorrow, none of my money will be part of the plan." Mother's expression changed instantly, but before she could respond, I walked away from the patio and drove back to my apartment 2 hours north, where I opened the financial folder I had avoided looking at for months. Inside were loan documents, bank statements, insurance paperwork, and emails showing exactly how deeply I had become connected to obligations that were never supposed to belong to me. The most frightening document was Ryan's business loan, where I had signed as a guarantor after Mom promised that his company was already profitable, and beside it was a recurring payment I had been making every month because his business account had quietly stopped covering the installment. The following morning, instead of sending an angry message, I called an independent financial advisor named Marcus Reed, who spent nearly 2 hours reviewing every document without once asking why I had allowed things to go this far. Finally, he leaned back and said, "Claire, you don't have a family problem anymore, you have a financial boundary problem, and those are two very different things." He helped me create a legal and financial exit plan, including separating accounts, documenting every payment, reviewing every agreement I had signed, and contacting the relevant institutions to understand exactly which obligations could be transferred, refinanced, or terminated without violating the contracts. That afternoon, My phone began exploding with messages because Ryan had apparently discovered that I had stopped making the voluntary payments I had been covering, and Mom sent me a paragraph accusing me of becoming selfish the moment I started earning more money. I answered only once, writing, "I am not abandoning anyone. I am simply no longer taking responsibility for financial commitments that belong to other adults." Then placed my phone on silent and continued working. For the first time, I understood that a boundary does not need to be dramatic to be powerful, because sometimes the strongest decision is simply refusing to participate in a pattern that has been hurting you for years. A week later, Ryan appeared outside my apartment with Mom and demanded that I come downstairs, claiming they needed to settle this like a family. But when I looked through the window and saw how angry they were, I knew the conversation would not be about reconciliation. I told them through the intercom that I was willing to communicate respectfully by phone or email, but I would not meet while they were shouting outside my home. Mom called me ungrateful. Ryan accused me of sabotaging his future, and when I still refused to open the door, they eventually left, leaving behind a silence that felt strangely peaceful rather than lonely. The next blow came when Mom posted a carefully edited version of the story online, telling relatives that I had suddenly withdrawn support after years of promising to help the family. And for a few minutes I felt the old urge to defend myself by publishing every bank statement and every private conversation. Instead, I remembered Marcus's advice that truth does not become stronger simply because it is shouted. So I saved the post, documented everything, and said nothing publicly. Within days, relatives began asking questions privately, and one of them forwarded me a message from Ryan admitting that he had known for months that the business was struggling, but had expected me to keep covering things until it recovered. That message changed everything because it proved something I had suspected but never wanted to believe. They had not merely become dependent on me by accident, they had started planning their lives around my willingness to rescue them. I gave the evidence to the appropriate professionals, completed the remaining steps needed to separate my finances, and watched the final automatic payment leave my account knowing it would be the last. There was no dramatic celebration, no applause, and no movie-style victory, just Claire Bennett sitting alone at a kitchen table while the rain tapped against the window, realizing that peace could feel almost frightening after spending so many years living inside other people's emergencies. Months passed, and the family crisis gradually stopped controlling my life as I enrolled in the graduate program I had postponed, moved into a brighter apartment closer to campus, and started rebuilding the savings I had once considered impossible to protect. I also learned to recognize the difference between helping someone and preventing them from facing the consequences of their own choices. One afternoon, while walking beside the lake, I received a message from Mom that simply said, "I finally understand why you left." And although I wasn't ready to reopen the relationship, I no longer felt the need to answer with anger because I had finally stopped measuring my worth by whether my family approved of me. A year after that painful dinner, I returned to the same lakeside town for a conference, and I passed the restaurant where everything had begun, remembering the embarrassment, the arguments, and the moment I had finally decided that being loved should never require me to remain useful. I stood there for a moment beneath the same string lights and realized that the person who had walked away that night was afraid of losing her family, while the woman standing there now was no longer afraid of losing people who demanded that she lose herself first. I smiled, continued walking toward the water, and understood that sometimes the ending you fear most becomes the beginning you desperately needed, because the moment you stop being everyone else's safety net is often the moment you finally learn how to build a life that can hold you. If you have ever been made to feel guilty for protecting your time, your money, or your peace, remember that setting a boundary does not make you cruel, and choosing a healthier life does not erase the love you once had for people who could not respect your limits. Sometimes walking away is not revenge at all, but the quiet decision to stop abandoning yourself just to keep everyone else comfortable. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.